Underneath the podium, where the Robinson family stood on the Family Feud stage, sat a brown paper bag that nobody in the audience could see. Inside it was a pair of men's dress shoes, size 11, cracked leather, worn through at both soles. Laces replaced twice with twine. They belonged to Gloria Robinson's father, a man named Earl, who had died 14 years earlier without ever owning a pair of shoes that fit properly. Gloria brought those shoes to every important moment in her life: her daughter's graduation, her son's wedding, 3 job interviews, 1 funeral, and now a game show taping in Atlanta. Earl had told her once, when she was 9 years old, "When you can't take me with you, take these. I walked my whole life in shoes that didn't fit, so you could walk in ones that do." Gloria was 63 years old. She still obeyed her father. November 8, 2019, a Friday afternoon. The Robinson family, Gloria, her son DeAndre, 34, her daughter Keisha, 31, her nephew Terrell, 28, and her granddaughter's father Marcus, 36, arrived at the Atlanta studio at 10:45 a.m. The competing family, the Hardings, Brett, 41, his wife Samantha, his brother Dale, his mother Peggy, and his cousin Nathan, arrived 15 minutes later. Both families went through makeup, wardrobe checks, and the standard warm-up routine. The Robinsons were laughing. Gloria was telling Steve during introductions that her father Earl had always dreamed of being on a game show but never got the chance because he worked 3 jobs and never had a free afternoon his entire adult life. Steve smiled and said, "Well, Miss Gloria, he's here today." Gloria touched the podium where the brown bag sat below and whispered, "Yes, he is." Nobody in that studio knew what was about to happen. Brett Harding grew up in Cullman, Alabama, a town that was 96% white when he was a child, and where certain attitudes were passed down like furniture. Unexamined, inherited, placed in rooms where no one questioned why they were there. His father, Rick Harding, left the family when Brett was 7 years old, walked out on a Tuesday morning, and never came back. No phone call, no letter, no child support. Peggy raised Brett and Dale alone on a cashier's salary at a grocery store, working 6 days a week, sometimes 7, pulling double shifts during holidays. Brett adored his mother. He also grew up angry in a way that had no target and no name. A boy without a father builds his identity from whatever materials are nearby. And in Cullman, in the 1980s, the materials nearby were resentment, scarcity, and a quiet permission to blame people who looked different for problems that had nothing to do with them. Brett never joined any group. He never marched or protested or committed any act of overt hatred. He simply carried a low-grade hostility that he mistook for common sense, and it calcified over 30 years into something that felt permanent. Brett had lost his job as a warehouse supervisor 4 months before the taping. The company relocated operations to another state and eliminated his position along with 40 others. He was behind on his mortgage by 2 months. His truck had been repossessed in September. Samantha had picked up extra nursing shifts to cover the gap, and Brett sat at home filling out applications that went unanswered. He told Samantha he was fine. That was a lie. He drank 3 beers every night after the kids went to bed and stared at job listing websites until 2 a.m. He told his mother the applications were going well. Another lie. When Samantha suggested Family Feud as a way to win some money and have fun, Brett agreed only because he had nothing else. He hadn't had fun in 4 months. He wasn't sure he remembered how. And that wasn't even the part that made Steve cry. The families took their positions. Steve introduced the first round. He asked both team captains to step forward for the face-off. The Andre Robinson walked to the center podium from the left. Bret Harding was supposed to walk from the right. He didn't move. Steve looked over. Bret was standing behind his podium with his arms crossed. Steve said, "Come on up, Bret, let's go." Bret shook his head once, looked at the Robinson family and said, loud enough for the first 6 rows and every microphone to capture, "I'm not playing against them." The studio fell completely silent. Steve's smile vanished. Not slowly, not like a fade. It disappeared like a light switch. His hands dropped to his sides. The Andre froze at the center podium. Gloria Robinson's hand moved underneath her podium and touched the brown paper bag. Peggy Harding grabbed her son's arm and hissed, "Bret," in a voice that held 41 years of fear about exactly this moment. Samantha's face went white. In the control room, a producer said into Steve's earpiece, "Go to break, right now." Steve did not go to break. He reached up, pulled out his earpiece, and set it on the podium. "What did you just say?" Steve's voice was level, not angry, not performed. Level in the way a man's voice goes level when he is deciding in real time what kind of person he is going to be. Bret said nothing. His arms stayed crossed. Steve walked toward him, not fast, not slow, deliberate. He stopped 4 feet from Bret Harding and looked at him the way a man looks at something he has seen before and hoped he would never see again. "Let me make sure I understand what's happening here. You're refusing to play this game because of the family standing across from you, because of what they look like." Bret's jaw tightened. He didn't confirm it. He didn't deny it. His silence was the loudest thing in the building. The audience thought that was the peak. They were wrong. Steve turned his back on Bret. He walked to the Robinson family's podium. He stood in front of Gloria Robinson, 63 years old, retired schoolteacher, a woman who had brought her dead father's shoes to a game show because she promised she'd take him everywhere. And he said, "Miss Gloria, I need to apologize to you. Not for him. For the fact that in 2019, in this country, on my stage, you have to stand here and experience this." Gloria's chin trembled, but she did not cry. She straightened her spine the way her father had taught her to straighten it, the way Earl Robinson had straightened his every morning for 48 years before walking into jobs where people treated him like he was less than the floor he mopped. She looked at Steve and said, "Baby, I've been standing through worse than this my whole life." Steve's composure cracked. He pressed both hands against his face. The audience saw his shoulders shake once, twice. When he dropped his hands, his eyes were red. He turned back to Bret. "Let me tell you something," Steve said. "You see that woman? She brought her father's shoes to this stage. Her father worked 3 jobs his entire life so his children could walk into rooms he was never allowed to enter. He never took a vacation. He never bought himself a new pair of shoes. He walked in ones that didn't fit because he spent every dollar making sure his family's shoes did." Steve's voice dropped. "And you won't stand on the same stage as his daughter." But Steve wasn't done. He stepped closer to Bret, close enough that the camera had to adjust. "I know you're angry, I can see it. But I'm going to tell you something you don't want to hear. That anger isn't about the people across from you. That anger is about somebody who isn't in this room." Bret's face changed. Something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition, fear, the beginning of a crack. "I know because I've been there. I was living in my car for 3 years, a 1976 Ford Tempo, showering in gas stations, eating what I could find. I was so angry I couldn't see straight. And I wanted to blame everybody around me because blaming them was easier than looking at the thing that actually broke me." Steve paused. Your father left, Brett, and that wasn't your fault. But what you do with the pain, that's yours. Brett Harding's arms uncrossed. Not voluntarily, his body simply gave out the tension it had been holding. His hands fell to his sides, his face folded. Dale put a hand on his brother's shoulder. Peggy was crying silently behind them. Samantha had her hand over her mouth. "You have 2 children at home," Steve said. "I know because your wife told our producers. A daughter who's 8 and a son who's 5. And I need you to think about what you're teaching them right now. Because my father taught me to respect every human being who walks this earth. And somebody taught you something different. And now you get to decide which lesson you pass down." But Steve wasn't done. He pulled a phone from the producer who had been standing frozen beside the stage. Steve looked at Samantha. "Your daughter's name is Lily?" Samantha nodded, tears streaming. Steve dialed the number. Brett's mother-in-law answered. Steve asked to speak to Lily. An 8-year-old girl's voice came through the speaker. "Hello? Lily, my name is Steve Harvey. I'm on TV with your daddy right now. Can you do me a favor? Can you tell your daddy what you told your mama last week when he was sad?" There was a pause. Then a small voice said, clear enough for every microphone and every person in that studio to hear, "Mama, why do you cry when you think I'm sleeping?" It wasn't what Steve had expected. It was something heavier. Lily hadn't answered the question Steve asked. She had answered the question no one had asked, the one that had been sitting in that household like smoke, invisible but suffocating. Samantha broke down. Brett grabbed the edge of the podium with both hands and his head dropped to his chest. His body was shaking. His 8-year-old daughter had just told 200 strangers and the entire world that the pain in that house was loud enough for a child to hear through walls. The studio fell completely silent. Steve walked back to center stage. He looked into camera 1. "Everyone watching at home right now, this man made a choice today that was wrong. He knows it. I know it. But I want you to see what happened when we didn't throw him away. When we didn't cut to commercial and pretend it didn't happen. We stood in it, and something cracked open." Steve pointed at the 2 families. "Pain makes people ugly. Grace makes people brave. This stage is big enough for both." He turned to Gloria Robinson. "Miss Gloria, I believe your father is watching this right now, and I believe he's proud." Gloria reached under the podium, pulled out the brown bag, removed the cracked leather shoes, and held them against her chest. The crew broke. Camera operators stepped back from their rigs. A sound engineer pulled off her headphones and covered her face. The stage manager sat down on the floor for the 2nd time that season. Steve looked at the shoes in Gloria's arms and said 5 words that would become the most shared quote on the internet that week. Those shoes walked through fire. Steve awarded both families $20,000. He paid the Hardings' share from his own account. He announced the creation of the Earl Robinson Walk Forward Foundation, seeded with $175,000 from the Steve Harvey Foundation, dedicated to funding mentorship programs for fatherless boys and anti-racism education in rural communities. Gloria was named honorary chair. Brett Harding walked across the stage. Every person in that audience watched him do it. He stopped in front of Gloria Robinson, looked at the shoes she was holding and said, "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm sorry." Gloria looked at him for a long moment. Then she took one of her father's shoes, cracked leather, worn sole, twine laces, and placed it in Brett's hand. "My daddy walked in shoes that hurt every day of his life," she said, "so that one day somebody might learn to walk right. You take that, and you learn." Brett clutched that shoe like it was the most important object he had ever held. The competing families embraced at center stage. DeAndre shook Dale's hand. Keisha hugged Samantha. Marcus and Nathan stood side by side, neither speaking, both nodding. The clip hit YouTube that Friday night. Within 36 hours, it had 58 million views. Within 3 weeks, 319 million across all platforms. The hashtag #WalkForward trended in 53 countries for 9 consecutive days. The Earl Robinson Walk Forward Foundation received $16.2 million in its first year and established mentorship programs in 340 communities across 28 states, pairing boys who grew up without fathers with men who volunteered to walk beside them. Brett Harding enrolled in a counseling program in Huntsville, Alabama, 2 weeks after the taping. He completed it in 5 months. He got a job as a warehouse manager in January 2020. In March 2020, he called Gloria Robinson for the first time. They spoke for an hour. He called her every month after that. In June 2021, Brett drove to Memphis with Samantha, Lily, and his son Owen, and sat in Gloria's living room. He returned the shoe. He placed it back in the glass case where Gloria kept her father's things, next to a photograph of Earl in his work clothes and a folded note that read, "When you can't take me with you, take these." Brett told Gloria he had hung a framed copy of that sentence in his daughter's bedroom. In a 2022 interview with Gayle King, Steve was asked if he had ever considered simply removing Brett from the stage. Steve shook his head. Removal teaches nothing. The man was drowning in something that was put on him when he was 7 years old. You don't punish drowning people, you pull them out. Gayle asked what Steve saw when he looked at Brett in that moment. Steve said, "I saw a little boy waiting for his daddy to come home. And I saw what happens when nobody teaches that little boy what to do with the pain." Today, Gloria Robinson is 67 years old. She volunteers at the Walk Forward Foundation's Memphis chapter 3 days a week. Earl's shoes sit in a glass case in the foundation's lobby, next to a plaque that reads, "He walked in shoes that didn't fit so others could walk in ones that do." Lily Harding is 12 years old. She wrote an essay for her school's Martin Luther King Jr. Day assembly titled, "What My Dad Learned on a Game Show." Her teachers said it was the best student essay she had read in 20 years of teaching. Lily's last line was, "My dad was lost, and a man on TV helped him find his way back. I'm glad the cameras were on." A pair of shoes sat in a brown paper bag underneath a game show podium. They were cracked and worn through and held together with twine. They had never been on television before. They had never been seen by anyone outside of one family. But when a woman held them against her chest on a stage where she had just been told she didn't belong, those shoes became the most important thing in the room. Some objects carry more than leather and thread. Some objects carry the entire weight of a life spent walking forward when the world told you to stop. If this story made you believe that people can change, that it's never too late to take a step in the right direction, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that bell. We bring you stories like this every single week. Stories about people who fell down and the moments that helped them stand back up. Subscribe now, because the next story might be the one that changes how you see the person standing next to you.